last-minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. It's okay.
And staying in front of the day isn't always as simple as 1, 2, 3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
what's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
You're listening to the Peak Physique Podcast with Andre Adams on the NASM Podcast Network.
Hey guys, welcome back to another exciting episode of the NASM Peak Physique Podcast. I'm your host, Andre Adams, NASM Master Trainer and IFBB Physique Olympian. On the menu today, we're going to be talking about how to avoid the bloat during your bodybuilding bulk. Most of you guys this time of year are in an extended improvement phase or off season, and hopefully you're able to put on some quality muscle as we prepare for the 2025 competition season. Now, in this episode, I'll break down the best practices and strategies on how to avoid some of that GI distress, chronic gut inflammation, and bloating during your growth phase. I'll share insights on common causes, nutritional workarounds, supplementation, and of course, reinforcing best meal prepping practices. We're going to kick things off by starting with define post-competition and improvement phase goals. Why are we even going through a bulk in the first place, and what does that entail? So as you guys that are more familiar with the sport know, coming out of competition season, the first thing we're going to do is really deload and then reverse diet out of a show. And we're going to eventually get into a metabolic building phase, which puts us at a surplus. Right? So it's got to be slow and steady, the same way we got in shape. We're going to be easing out of the show, deloading some of our inflammation causing inputs like, high impact cardio and resistance training, and then slowly starting to bring up our calories as we progress into a full-on off season or bulk season. Now, part of the reason that we do this metabolic building phase is not just for skeletal muscle growth, but also to build our metabolism to a much higher level, which is going to set us up for a successful next competition season. Another reason that we go through this post-competition phase and some of those initial goals would be recovering our organ systems and hormones from the stress and strain of contest prep. Again, high inputs of weight training, cardio, supplementation, extreme dieting. All these things can really start to tax our central nervous system and our organ system. So those are some things that we're trying to recover as well during the bulk phase or improvement phase. And then really just reinforce good nutritional framework to support overall health, lifestyle, and of course, muscular development. Some of the common issues when bulking, anyone that's gone through a bulk definitely knows the feelings here. They're real. Gas and bloat, probably number one on the list. In some form or fashion, we've all experienced some digestive issues, discomfort, GI distress, etc. So gas and bloat, definitely top of the list when bulking, because again, we're just forcing so much food down. Depending on the individual, it can become very challenging to really digest and uptake the nutrients in a way that's efficient and doesn't cause inflammation in the gut. Acute or chronic GI distress, slower digestional motility, dysregulation of bowel movements, all these things can tend to happen when you're packing on a lot of size and just really requiring you to eat a really, really high amount of calories each day. This can also lead to poor nutrient uptake, slowed gains. Obviously, if you're not comfortable, you get a little discouraged. It's hard to get your meals down. It's hard to really recover and see the muscle growth that you're after. This can also lead to just poor energy output, so low energy, mental, emotional discouragement, and certainly some body dysmorphia. If you're walking around bloated, belly's distended 24/7, your entire off season, it's not going to be very pleasant for you emotionally either. And you can start to have some really negative or toxic thoughts about the way that your physique is looking, right? So we definitely want to manage these things when bulking to put us in a really good, successful position to execute during that next on season. Best strategies to avoid the bloat during bulk. Number one, I like to advise my athletes on avoiding gas-causing or hard-to-digest veggies. This is going to include things like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, undercooked vegetables, raw vegetables for sure. You certainly want to avoid whenever you are already having issues with bloating. And then any other known triggers. So if you've got certain food types or food allergies or things that are pro-inflammatory in your gut, those are ones that you want to keep a list of and certainly avoid or start to phase them out with substitutes in your diet. I like to consider lower fiber carbs, and this also applies to fats. So again, if you're having issues with chronic bloating and you're in a bulk phase, you're eating a lot of food and it's hard to get your meals down, start to look for some of those lower fiber options. Things like cream of rice can work well instead of oats. Dry carbs like rice cakes or even a bagel post-workout can tend to work better than high fiber, slower digesting carbs. And then for fats, really switch to things like your oils, right? So you're going to look at things like MCT oil, olive oil, macadamia nut oil. All these are going to be advantageous over tree nuts and things that are maybe very fibrous and can cause a lot of gas and bloat to your digestive system. Another thing I like to recommend, if the protein seems to be one of your triggers, is consider mechanically broken down lean proteins. Those are going to be things like your lean chicken, ground chicken, lean ground turkey, can be lean beef. Oftentimes these things might be easier to digest than, just a whole chicken breast or a steak. So this can be another strategy if you're starting to experience some issues and discomfort with your GI due to the protein source. Consider trying various mechanically broken down protein types and see if that helps resolve some of the issues. And while we're talking about proteins, also avoid really cheap whey protein powders. We've all been familiar with some of the bloating or gassiness when you've got a really cheap protein powder. The reason that happens is a lot of times they're just denatured, lower in quality. They're made at, I don't know if you guys are familiar with whey protein, but it starts in more of a gelatinous state. And then you basically have to bake it, right? Or you can ionize it and convert it into a powder state. So if that's done at really high heat temperatures, it can cause some denaturing of the protein, which makes it difficult to digest. So look for a quality protein source, ideally either an isolate or if it's whey protein concentrate, look for one that is, cold processed. That's going to be a little bit easier for your body to digest and uptake. Back to veggies, look at thoroughly cooking and washing your veggies. We certainly want to wash them for various reasons, but also make sure that they're fully cooked. If you do decide to have broccoli or anything like this, you want to make sure that everything is completely cooked all the way through. Same thing applies to potatoes and starches. That's going to also relieve some of that GI discomfort and make things just a little bit easier for you to digest. I encourage a variety of different colored veggies, proteins, and carbs. This is really going to help balance your healthy gut microbiome. And since you're at a caloric surplus, you can also consider subbing some of those high fibrous veggies we just talked about for higher calorie or even, veggies that contain some carbs or sugars like carrots, peas, bell peppers, etc. Those are going to be good ones to start phasing in while you're in this improvement bulk phase. When you get really deep into prep, we like to take a lot of those out and stick with just, things that are leafy greens like your spinach, kale, these types of vegetable sources. But certainly in off season, start encouraging that variety. Guys, if you're just joining us, this is the Peak Physique Podcast, and we are talking about how to avoid that dreaded bloating during your next bulk phase. All right, let's hop back in here. We're talking about best strategies to avoid the bulk in terms of food types, food substitutions, and I want to hit on cooking fresh versus letting your food sit in the refrigerator. So we've actually presented on this topic quite a few times in some of our seminars, but for you guys that don't know, we always advise our athletes to cook food fresh daily when possible. Not always possible depending on your busy schedules, but in an ideal world, you would be cooking your meals fresh daily. Try to avoid letting them sit in the refrigerator for more than 24 to 48 hours. Or if you're not able to do this and you need to cook in bulk, that's okay. Just make sure you cook and then flash freeze your food. Now, why do we do this? This is going to actually help reduce the amount of bacterial growth on your food. If you take starches and carbs like rice or potatoes, they're actually very dirty, starches or carbohydrates. And you should always be washing even your rice before you cook it and certainly before you eat it. But again, what we're after there is lowering the amount of bacterial growth. And then this is going to in turn help you digest your food better and avoid some of that bloat or GI, we'll call it gut imbalances in bacteria. We do also like to add in a prebiotic, but I'll talk about that a little bit later in the podcast when we get down to supplementation. But for people that have this chronic bloat response, oftentimes it can be resolved just by changing the strategy of how they're prepping their meals. Another thing is histamine intolerance. So you can also have bacteria that induces histamine response from the body. And if you're getting a high gut histamine, that again can affect your overall bulk phase, but you're going to be in a lot of discomfort and chronic bloat, and it's going to be hard to really hit your calories for the day if you feel bloated. So we're going to manage down things like bad bacteria or gut histamine by focusing on meal prep. The next thing is, obviously, if you've got any sort of gluten intolerance, you don't have to be to the extreme case where you have like celiac disease or anything, but if you've got even a remote gluten intolerance, I would say stick with gluten-free foods whenever possible, or worst case within moderation, but I would just cut them all together if you seem to have an inflammation response to gluten or wheat. And then also follow a potentially low histamine diet. And there are tests for this also. So when we do things like our HTMA, hair tissue mineral analysis, we can check for things like histamine response or gut histamine, and then address those issues specifically. But if you suspect it and you want to give it a try, some things would be avoiding dairy, spinach, mushrooms, soy, avocado, banana, strawberries, even cashews, walnuts, vinegar, caffeinated coffee. So it's really the caffeine in those coffees and teas that can increase gut histamine response. And then, of course, avoiding eating leftovers that have been in the refrigerator for more than 24 to 48 hours, which we just discussed. So that's something that if you want more information, definitely reach out to me direct. But histamine can definitely be a culprit in many, many cases. And I've encountered this at least 3 to 4 times in the past 6 months with some of our athletes. You should also consider replacing up to 1 meal a day, if needed, with a liquid meal replacement shake, right? So this would be a meal replacement shake with a high quality whey protein source. You can have your MCT oil, for example, or if you need carbs, you can add, some either fruit or complex carbs to replace your macros for that meal. But this can also help too if you're eating 6 to 7 whole food meals a day during your bulk, especially for you larger guys out there. It takes a lot of food and you can only stuff so much down and spread that out over 6, 7, or 8 meals throughout the day. So, you might want to consider replacing up to one of those meals with a meal replacement shake just for comfort. Some guys don't have this issue, but for me personally, I've always had trouble getting above, let's say 4,000 or 4,500 calories in a day, because there's just not a lot of calories in clean food, right? And there's only so much volume in your stomach. So I've always had to replace one full meal with a shake, and then post-workout, I usually have an isolate as well. So just something to consider there if you're having trouble downing all of that whole food for your bulk. You could also implement, and this is something I highly recommend, implementing at least one low-calorie defeed day per week. This is going to be your opportunity to give your entire GI system a chance to really just deload and reset, right? So ideally, you might start to get backed up throughout the week. This gives your whole organ system, your digestive tract, everything a chance to just kind of reset, flush your system out a bit, and then set you up for the next week where you're not in, so much distress. So think about adding the defeed days, just general rule of thumb for me, that's going to usually entail pulling back my calories about 500 to 700 calories on that particular day. Oftentimes I'll pair that with my rest day so that, it's not affecting my training and my workouts. But something to consider for sure, especially if you're experiencing a lot of GI discomfort towards the end of the week. We're going to jump into recommended supplements. So this is, something that I think you could really implement year round, but especially during a bulk when you're pushing a lot of calories daily, right? Things like digestive enzymes. I like to take these with, 2 to 3 meals per day or on an as needed basis. But these are going to help break down your carbs, proteins, and fats more efficiently. So obviously that's going to help avoid some of the bloat and gassiness, but also it's going to help you with nutrient uptake. So definitely consider a quality digestive enzyme. You can get these in powders or pills or capsules. Prebiotics, and then occasionally probiotics, but prebiotics tend to be a little bit less aggressive and more effective for overall gut balance. And I also like to oftentimes pair this with sodium butyrate, right? So if you are just coming out of a prep or you're on prep, oftentimes due to the restriction in prep, right, we don't have a lot of variety in our diet, and you can really throw your gut microbiome out of whack. So the sodium butyrate will actually help to balance the healthy gut microbiome, which in turn will help digest your food better and avoid more of that bloat. And then for the histamine intolerance that we talked about, one of the easiest ways to combat this is really just adding B6 supplementation. Right? This is going to help increase the body's DAO enzyme, which helps to inhibit gut histamine. So instead of popping, Gas-X and antacids and Pepto and stuff daily, really think about adding a B6 supplement to inhibit some of that histamine response, follow a low histamine diet, and then try to avoid the known triggers for histamine response. I'll give a couple more of my favorite products here, things that have really just helped myself and a lot of my athletes work successfully through a bulk phase or even through their contest prep phase. First Form's got a really good product I like called GI Advantage. That one's got some of the top ingredients that I would recommend for anyone, especially when you are in a bulk phase. Aloe vera, it's got L-glutamine, slippery elm, quercetin, marshmallow root, etc. So there's quite a few heavy hitters in the First Form GI Advantage that are just going to help keep your GI system comfortable and help keep you regulated. And then there's also a few others that are out there. I'll list again some of my favorites. There's N2 Guard, there's Cycle Safe, there's Anybody Supplements makes one called AD Ravenous. There's quite a few that will help protect your organ system, so liver, kidney, heart, but also primarily keep your GI system fleshed out, especially during something like a bulk phase. And they even have extra things in there, right, for DHT blocking and helping to increase nutrient uptake. So some of those more complex supplements have a lot of the ingredients you need, plus other benefits. So I recommend looking into some of those to make your bulk phase more enjoyable. And lastly, what I'll leave you guys with in, just some general advice that will help, again, reduce bloating and make your bulk phase more comfortable is look for the best supplements that work best with your body. Right. So there are certain supplements or foods that can trigger that GI disruption. You want to definitely document those and make sure that you avoid those moving forward. It might work for some people, but that particular supplement might be working against you. And if you've got chronic inflammation in the gut or digestional motility issues, this can definitely slow down your progress and just make your bulk season really unenjoyable. And then, of course, the pink elephant in the room, for any athletes that are using PEDs or AAS, especially things like an Anadrol or a Trenbolone, these types of things are often overlooked when it comes to our digestive health. So I want to put that out there in case you guys encounter this with any athletes that you coach that are disclosing, any supplements or PED type of usage. A lot of these things can cause appetite suppression, chronic acid reflux issues, gut bloat, poor sleep patterns, which also can affect your ability to digest food, and then overall just negatively affecting your digestion and ultimately growth. So make sure that you've got that open communication with your athletes and that you are well aware of any supplements or exogenous hormones or anything else going in the body, just so you can help guide them and point them in the right direction. And obviously, if there's anything that seems to be out of the norm, then you always refer them to, their medical advisors, of course. But you should at least be well versed on what to look for and general recommendations on how to progress without having these GI distress symptoms. And lastly, I recommend for yourself or for your athletes you're coaching, make sure you've got that feedback loop in your check-ins. So one thing I always make sure to throw in there is we have questions built into our check-in forms specific to GI health. Are there any bloating issues? Has digestion been normal? Any changes since last week? How is your appetite and hunger, appetite between meals, etc.? So make sure that you're asking the right questions to solicit feedback so that you can help guide your athletes to a successful bulk and ultimately a successful on-season. Guys, that's all I got on my top tips for how to avoid the bloat and set you up for a successful bulk season. If you guys have additional questions, feel free to reach out to me direct. You can find me on Instagram at AndreAdams_official. You can email me at trainingbydre@gmail.com. And I've actually got 2 websites. You can reach me at AndreAdamsOfficial.com or our new platform, which is TeamAdamsPrep.com. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Peak Physique Podcast. I'll see you guys next time.